Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, August 23rd, 2012. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week, a visit to Gorst Valley Hops in Wisconsin. James Altwies, director and horticulturist at Gorst Valley, shows us around his experimental hop yard and talks about new developments at his Midwestern hop growing collective. If you're new at home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. And our show page on Facebook is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how it works. Whenever you need to shop on Amazon, don't go to Amazon first. Come to our website, basicbrewing.com. Click on our Amazon ad. That will take you to Amazon, and then you can shop as if nothing happened. But you will be helping to support the show because we'll get a chunk of whatever you purchase. Not the actual thing, but the purchase price. It'd be bad if you bought something and a hunk was taken out when you got it. Anyway, it won't cost you any extra, and you'll be supporting this show, and we greatly appreciate your support. Same goes for the Brew Your Own Magazine and American Homebrewers Association ads on our site as well. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone and Android podcast apps. The podcast or the Android app, people are having trouble finding that on the Android store. If you can't find it there, go to Amazon.com. After clicking on our link, and then search for Basic Brewing app, and then you can find it on Amazon.com. We're also on the BlackBerry podcast directory and the Stitcher app as well. Let's take a look into the mailbag, shall we? Ray in Ocean City, Maryland has this to say. He says, Three things. He didn't slur when he wrote, but it says three things. Number one, I found your podcast 3 months ago as I was considering getting into home brewing. Since I travel a lot, I was able to listen to the archives daily. I've now listened to every one of your podcasts from start to finish. Holy smokes. Well, hopefully not finish, he says, but finish to date. Thanks to you, Steve and Andy, I am now a home brewer. Well, that's awesome. Thanks, Ray. Ray says, I was brewing a batch this weekend. Oh, this is number 2, by the way. I was brewing a batch this weekend. I finally broke down and bought a wort cooler. I put it together. Since I am an engineer, I figured a tube, a hose, and a clamp should not be challenging. But I remembered your Brewing Disasters episode, where many wrote in about water spewing everywhere. So as the boil was about over, I took it outside and hooked it up to the hose for a test. Water spewed everywhere. Ray says, with a little duct tape engineering, I was back in action without a story for your next Brewing Disasters show. Well, there you go. That's the reason why we do the Brewing Disasters show. Well, they're funny, but also we do the Brewing Disasters show because we want people to learn from our mistakes. Ray says, number 3, I am looking at starting a homebrew club in Ocean City, Maryland. Let me know if any of your listeners in this area are interested. So, if you are listening to me and you are in Ocean City, Maryland, or thereabouts, drop me a line and I'll forward your info to Ray. And we'll get you started. It'd be cool to have a new homebrew club started out there. I've got a couple of emails and comments centered on the practice of freeze concentrating cider into Applejack lately. That's where you freeze a hard cider, and then you invert the container, the jug or whatever, that you have the frozen stuff in to let the alcohol, which has a lower melting point than water, drain into another container. This gives you a higher alcohol concentrated beverage. Now, the process isn't distillation, so you're not just getting alcohol. You'll get some water in there, too, as the ice melts. But the questions are about concentrating methanol and not just ethanol. People are wondering, they're worried that they're getting all this concentrated methanol and it's going to give them headaches or whatever, bad effects from drinking methanol. And so I don't know about the science of all this stuff, so I forwarded the question to Brad Sturgeon up at Monmouth College, who does know chemistry, and here's what he had to say. He said the freezing method to increase alcohol takes advantage of the freezing points, negative 114 degrees Celsius for ethanol, and negative 98 degrees Celsius for methanol. If you were to cool the mixture below negative 114 degrees Celsius, then all of the liquid would freeze. Okay, you got that? If you would cool the mixture to negative 110 degrees Celsius, then the water and the methanol would be solid, leaving only the ethanol in a liquid state, and this could then be removed in a pure state. But Brad says if you cool to minus 20 degrees Celsius, about as low as any standard freezer can go, then both the methanol and ethanol are still liquid, and removing these from the icy mixture would result in concentrating the lower freezing components, i.e. the alcohols, with no specific separation of the alcohols, hence no concentration of any toxic materials. Brad says probably a more important question is where the methanol might come from. I would have to research this a bit, but I'm assuming most homebrewers will be using quality starting materials, grains, apples, and not any woody parts, and that the bacteria responsible for producing methanol will not be present. So there you go. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. So in a nutshell, if your home freezer is not cold enough to freeze one alcohol and not the other, and it's probably not. You're not going to get to 110 degrees below 0 Celsius. You're not concentrating one alcohol over the other. You're not separating those two. So if there is methanol in the Applejack, and that's a question, is there methanol in the Applejack? It will be in the same proportion to ethanol as it is in the unconcentrated cider. Hope that makes sense. It seems to make sense to me. I think I understand it. Later this week, I'll be posting the Basic Brewing video episode that Bob Stemsky and I shot up at the Great Taste of the Midwest in Madison, Wisconsin. Thanks again to Bob for the help. If you are a user of our Basic Brewing app, you may have noticed that the video episode is already out there. Just a little perk for y'all who have bought the app. I appreciate your supporting the show. And for those who don't have the app, or can't have the app, you don't have a device that supports it, don't worry. It'll be out there in a day or so. A couple of years ago, I talked to James Altwies of Gorst Valley Hops on the phone for this podcast. His company represents a collective of farmers who are growing small hop yards, mostly in areas of their farms that may have been fallow otherwise. Wisconsin used to be a place where hops were grown commercially, but most of that business has been moved to the Northwest. But now the folks at Gorst Valley are sort of starting from scratch to introduce commercial hop growing back into the region. And that means finding hop varieties that will thrive in the microclimates in that part of the country, supporting growers with lab support, developing harvesting equipment especially tailored for small growers, and establishing relationships with brewers who will be the customers of that endeavor. Now, we shot video of James at his experimental hop yard for an upcoming Basic Brewing video episode, and I thought that you'd enjoy hearing the whole unedited interview here.
Well, we are in Gorst Valley. This is Gorst Valley Hops, and so just west of Madison, Wisconsin, about 20 minutes near Sauk City and Mazomanie and Cross Plains, sort of out here in the unglaciated part of what we call a driftless area. So we are in our Gorst Valley's primary experimental hop yard.
So what does Gorst Valley do?
Well, Gorst Valley is we're a collective of growers, and we have growers all across the upper Midwest that have hops on an acre, 2 acres, certainly no more than 3 or 4, that are focused on producing hops as a crop to diversify their farms. And that was the entire point. And to get the majority of the value in the crop that we sell to the brewer back to the farmer. For the risk and the capital that goes into it, they should get a little bit more than 15%. So we average, close to 70% for folks moving in, and as they, as we mature together, the idea is to get the majority of the value, even more than that, hopefully into the 80s percent there. So we grow, we process hops here in Madison, just west of Madison. So pelletize, hammer mill. We have our own labs here. We do all the chemical analysis in-house. We do research on these hops in our lab, looking at different oil fractions in the cones and how that's impacted by processing, things like that, to get good hard data so we can have a little bit more evidence, laboratory evidence behind our statements where the proof is in the pint. That's our tagline, that we can produce something that a lot of brewers don't have access to quality-wise because of the scale that large grower processors have to engage in. They don't have the luxury of drying slowly or drying with low heat just because of the volume that they have. And that's what I try to teach people. It's like, these guys aren't, the large-scale growers are doing what their system demands of them. And they're trying to minimize damage and keep as much quality as they can based on their scale. We're much smaller, so that gives us a lot of other avenues to explore, like, very low temperature drying, very gentle processing to preserve a lot of these oils and characteristics that brewers don't necessarily see. So that's why we say the proof is in the pint. I can show you a chromatograph and spectrophotometric readings on, all kinds of chemistry, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't translate into your beer in a sensory experience, what's the point? So there's no added value there. So that's our focus. That's our goal. So we want to bring hop growing back to the small farmer as a way to diversify their current crop portfolio, as well as make a more stable base in our region for, the high concentration of craft brewers that we have here. So that's what we do.
So where did you get the idea to do this? What was the genesis of all this?
Well, the genesis of all this was I've been in specialty crop, horticultural crop. This is a hort crop versus, like soybeans and corn, agronomic crop for close to 20 years now. And I researched several different cropping strategies all across the western U.S., Central and South America is the territory that I covered doing ag research. And some of these attributes, characteristics of our production methodology with our growers, value share concept, where we help them grow. We find a market for them to grow. We do the sales and distribution and any sort of, processing that needs to happen and get the majority of the value back to them. That came out of my travels in Central America with, melon growers that were collectively growing and selling to folks like Del Monte and Dole. But they were growing on very small parcels of land. So I said, you know what, I like this idea. This makes sense. You can have, 40 hectares, so, 80-some acres of land amongst, 20 growers. And they all are very, very diversified in their crop production. No single grower is large enough to supply a big, distributor like Dole or Del Monte, so they kind of join forces. But yet they stay independent. And they've got one or two people in their group. All they do is they are facilitators. They make sure that the growers know exactly what Dole or Del Monte or whoever they're selling to wants in terms of size and quality and packing and all that sort of stuff. And they work between the customer and the producer to make sure that everything's in lockstep so that the customer gets what they want as it was, designed. And the majority of that value goes back to the farmer. The facilitators in the middle, they don't get paid until the grower gets paid. So if they're not doing their job to make the growers productive as they can be and hitting the right quality marks, they don't get paid as much. So we want to do the same thing. And so I said, this makes sense. I like this idea. I need a crop to demonstrate it on. So we started looking at a lot of crop opportunities and different, value added, like, whether it's culinary oils, from specialty seeds, or looking at artisan fruit vinegars. Where is the market there for to demonstrate this production methodology? And I said, I don't want to try and create a market. I don't have. Well, that's not my expertise. I'm not creating a market for a product. What do I have a lot of around here? We drink a lot of beer around here. So, brewers, okay. And right about then, 2006, 2007, the hop market underwent a self-correction, as the terminology is, and brewers started screaming for hops that they couldn't all of a sudden get, and that the price was just jacked through the roof. It was ridiculous. So, interesting. We dig a little more. Well, wouldn't you know, Wisconsin was the king of hops for about 15, 20 years back in the late 1800s. So the question of can we grow them here was that was settled. Yes, we absolutely can. So now, if we're going to reintroduce this crop, we have a clean slate. Let's make sure that everything that we're doing is based on, logic, it's based on science, it's based on what we know from agronomy, and not based on what we think, and give it a go. And that's what we've done.
So what are we looking at here? I mean, what do we see around us?
This is Brewer's Gold. These are one of a handful of varieties that have really performed well in our, region, and specifically climatically, it's a really robust plant. It's an older variety. It's very simple genetics. It was a European crossed with a wild hop from Manitoba, and it's robust. It's got very heavy, leathery leaves, much more so than a lot of our other varieties. So that makes it more resistant to sucking insects like mites and aphids. It's moderately resistant to most fungal diseases, downy, powdery mildew. It's a huge yielder, as you can see, and it's got a very midline sort of dual-purpose chemistry. So, 5 to 7 alpha. Its oil content is enormous. It's 2.5 milliliters per 100 grams. I mean, that's a huge amount of oil compared to something like a Golding or a Hallertauer, which maybe would be 0.5 milliliter per 100 grams. So these are very oily, very stinky. They have big aroma, and they grow great here. It kind of fell out of vogue. 15 or 20 years ago with the advent of these more citrusy kind of hops. This does not have a citrusy body to it at all. It's got certainly more herbal, spicy aroma, and that's based on the oil fractions, which oil fractions in that 2.5 milliliters is most present. It's a huge humulene wallop in there, which is where most of that herbal spicy comes from. Very low on the remainder of the sister oils. So doesn't pair well with everything right now. Certainly with the big IPA trends and the big citrus blast trends, this isn't the hop for you. But in Wisconsin, in our region, a lot of brewers kind of bucking that system, moving more and more back to traditional beers and traditional styles, and certainly more ambers, more nut browns, more things with a balanced, even body. And we're reintroducing this variety to brewers, and it's really doing well. So for our growers, it seems like a good way to go.
So if we look around, describe this plot of land and what we're seeing around us. I mean, not everything is doing so well, but that's all part of the plan, right? That's
exactly right. Not everything is doing well down here. And if we look, over to other rows, things don't look so good. And those are variety trials, long-term variety trials. This is not something that you put in the ground in a year and expect to get, good data off of about, long-term productivity. So we've got a lot of European varieties in here. We have some first-generation daughters of European varieties, Mount Hoods, Sterlings, things that were bred directly off of a Hallertauer or a Saaz or something like that. It's completely microclimate dependent. So in this valley where we get a lot of fog, we get a lot of blazing heat in the summertime, these varieties don't like it here. They like it in other regions of the state where a lot of our growers have different microclimates, and that's one of the reasons we have such a diversified network, is so that we can have the opportunity to, as I say, exploit the microclimate and get some of these other varieties that don't do so well here in other places to kind of round out the portfolio. On top of that, this year, with the drought that we've had and the ridiculous heat, we had a spider mite infestation, not just in hops, but pretty much every agronomic crop that there is around. Most of our growers are cropping several different plants. And if they were next to soybean fields that were absolutely infested with spider mites, they saw very, very heavy damage. Some varieties weathered it quite well, like Brewer's Gold, because it's not the first one to pick on if you're a spider mite. They're going to go to a little bit easier pickings because of the leaf structure and how dense the wax is on the leaf. And some of these leaves are just absolutely enormous. They're the size of dinner plates. So we don't see so much predation there. But this plot here, our experimental plot, it's what it's about. It's about long-term experimentation so we can build our knowledge on what works best here for us, and not based on most of the research that's available now, which is in the Pacific Northwest. That's great. That's where the main production is. That's where the research needs to be focused. But what grows best for them and their production methodologies may not, and in most cases does not, translate equally well to our region. So it's kind of learning from scratch. But we said, you know what, we're going to take that on as part of our charter as Gorst Valley. We're going to try to solve a lot of those questions for our growers. That way they get off to the best start they possibly can and don't find out these things, in the long run. So,
talk about your engineering efforts and the equipment that you're developing.
Engineering. So as Gorst Valley, I knew we couldn't do this all by myself because I'm not an engineer. My background is in chemistry, but I'm certainly not a chemist. So I brought together a group of friends that I knew had these expertise that I felt that we would need to sort of redesign the system from scratch. And so one of the things that we looked at, one of the programs was, what are the barriers to entry for small-scale growers to do hops as a cash crop on a very small scale? And one of them was equipment. There's nothing for harvesting and drying equipment for the 1 acre grower. Just nothing. And if you look at, a plant like Brewer's Gold, it's going to take one person the better part of an hour to handpick one plant. And when you got 1,200 plants, that's not going to cut it. We need something else. The smallest scale harvesters that were on the market were used machines from Germany. Wolf Anglick Technique is the manufacturer. These harvesters were for the 20 to 50 acre German grower, which is still about the size of their plots over there. But they were old, built in the 50s, sitting in barns somewhere. And someone with some savvy said, hey, you know what? I think we can market these to the U.S. growers, the small guys that are starting up. But, they're extremely pricey. By the time you got it over here and working, you're into it $50,000 or more. And unless you're growing 20 to 50 acres, that's hard to recoup that cost. So we said, we got to do something about this. So we researched old patents on hop harvesting equipment. There were a lot of ideas back in the late 1800s and early 1900s about hop harvesting equipment and separation equipment. But their ideas and their ingenuity outpaced their ability to actually build this stuff. It was a good idea then, but they just didn't have the way, all the technology to do it. So we pulled a lot from those old patents and said, I think we can take the best parts of these and put them together in a small scale that's affordable for small-scale growers that can dramatically reduce their harvest times. And so we spent about 3 years designing and then building prototype harvesters, small-scale harvesters, as well as hop drying technology to directly solve some of these problems. And so just this past year, we started a new company called Bine Implement, and their sole charter is to prototype and fabricate equipment for the small-scale grower affordably. You know, I'll put the affordably thing in there. You know, now you can get into a harvester for somewhere around $12,000 that with 3 people you can be putting through bines, you know, anywhere between 30 bines an hour to 60 or 70 bines an hour with just 3 people. That's a big deal. So we've got units in the field right now that were purchased and are being used, and some of the on third-year centennials, third-year cascades, and very vigorous varieties. We're seeing average picking rates somewhere around that 50 to 60 bines an hour with 3 people. So it's a huge game changer. I'm very proud of that. And we're continuing to evolve that. We're designing new drying systems that use no heat at all. They use dehumidification technologies that, again, preserve all those essential oils. And we're trying to start at a small scale and then ramp that up to get to a size that, you know, if you want to do 2-acre drying at a time, well, you can if you're a 10 or a 20-acre grower. So that's really the next step in the equipment evolution.
So where do you see your company, and where do you see the local grower situation around here in, say, 10 years?
There's, as most things go, when we have a lot of interest and a lot of buzz, people are excited about it, and they want to get into it. They want to start doing something now. Hops, there's nothing fast about hops except how fast they grow. The planning and the being honest with yourself about how much labor it takes is really critical. And what we're seeing is a rapid interest, expansion of people putting in hops. However, along with that, we're already seeing people abandoning those yards because of the amount of labor and the resources it takes to make it happen. We try to educate them. We have workshops and things on the nitty-gritty, the ugly parts of hop production, and we try to talk. I tell people at the beginning of the workshops, I'm going to talk 90% of you out of doing this. And that number's stuck over the last 5 years. It's about 80 to 90% of the people that get the information say, wow, this is fantastic. There's no way I'm doing this. It's not happening. But this, we want to make sure people go into this informed. However, there's some folks that, sometimes passion overrides, logic, and they jump into it. And we're going to see, we see an explosion of hops going in. And then I think equally as quickly in the next few years, we're going to see a rapid decline of those folks, just because of, what the realities say. The potential here in the upper Midwest, with Wisconsin, our friends in Michigan, there's a lot of very focused, driven, realistic, people building businesses around this, and ultimately those are the ones that I believe will survive. It is a business. We tell people there's nothing wrong with having a hobby and being what we call a hobby grower. That's fine, but the division between the two is, I say, hobbies usually cost you money and businesses make you money, so it's fine. Decide which one you're going to be. There's no right or wrong answer there, but they require two very different mentalities, and outlooks going forward. So I predict that, we will have more hops going in the ground with a diversified, groups of people, of several grower groups over the next, 3 to 5 years, and then we're going to see equally as rapid a contraction as either those yards go uncared for or there's quality issues, or people just stop, altogether because it's too much. The demand isn't going away. As we look at the craft brewer market and what the segment's doing right now, and it's, explosive growth, we need to be aware of how we are treating our customers, price points that we're setting, and focusing on building long-term relationships and adding value to these brewers. It's not enough to bring them a product. Local is hot right now, but it can't be the only attribute that you're bringing your customer is local. You have to bring them something else. So the focus on the customer is absolutely critical. Brewers want as much technical information as they can get, and if they can call or email somebody local that understands those aspects and how it can work in their product and their beer, that has an enormous value to them, and they're willing to pay for it. But they're not willing to pay, $30 or $40 a pound for it, and I don't think that's fair. Everyone needs to be able to have a cut of that amount, and so we know what it costs us to produce, we know what it costs us to process, and we know what it costs the brewer to use hops. So let's settle on something that's appropriate so that everyone can make a living wage. So that's the focus, and I see people still chasing dollars, unfortunately, which is going to happen anytime you have a sort of a renaissance, but I don't see that lasting long.
So you've got to convince people that you are starting from scratch again in this region.
We are starting from scratch in this region. What we knew in the 1860s and 1870s, we knew based on one variety, maybe two. They came directly from Europe. And honestly, we didn't know anything about soil nutrition, soil microbial health, and, integrated pest management and all those sorts of things. So we are starting from scratch. And in the early years, as one would expect, we had brewers that, said, with arms folded, let's just see what happens here. This is a flash in the pan. And rightly so, they should be cautious. And as the years have ticked by, and we've demonstrated expansion and processing capabilities and technical acumen, they're coming around. They're saying, okay, all right, I get this. You're really looking at this as reconstructing the industry, not as a group of beer geeks. Let's put it that way. Although we are beer geeks, we're also horticulturists and engineers and chemists that are all focused on bringing the crop back and providing our farmers with a way to diversify their crop that has a way bigger, much larger return per acre than anything else they can grow legally.
All right, awesome. Anything else that you can think of that I've missed?
I've given you pretty much the rundown. This is Gorst Valley. We're very dedicated. We're, like I said, we're all technical people, and so we're very focused on the science of what we're doing here, as well as the market building and the business administration. You have to have all of those things in order to give yourself the best chance of success as a business, and that's taken a considerable amount of resources to do, more so than I think most people realize when they want to jump into a business. I think any small business owner will tell you the same thing, that I didn't realize the admin work was going to be so time consuming, but it is. And we're still learning. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying I don't know, but it should be followed by I can find out. You'll hear us say that frequently. Say, you know what, I'm not sure. However, I believe that X, Y, and Z. Well, then let's test it. Let's see. Let's be honest with each other, because we don't have all the answers yet. We never will, but we can become smarter together if we're honest with each other. And so that's something we all need to become better at doing. So.
Very good. Well, good luck, James.
Thank you. We are. We're just crazy enough to make this work, I think. It certainly requires a little sense of adventure, let me tell you, and willing to roll with the punches. But it's building a very strong community between farmers and brewers, which is what we were out for. And just a few weeks ago, we had a Gorst Valley family reunion out here, where we brought all of our growers and all of our brewer customers together and made them talk to each other. And great times were had by all, and people are looking forward to next year. And that's what it's about, is to make sure that people know where their products, their food, I don't care if it's a textile or, a hamburger or what have you, hops, know where it comes from, and make sure that those people are within arm's reach of each other. So.
Well, thanks again to James, and again to Bob Stemsky for his help. You didn't hear Bob, but he was who James was looking at as I was holding the camera and asking the questions. And he was a target, essentially. And, who can't look at Bob for 30 minutes? I don't know. Bob and I had so much fun up there in Wisconsin. I hope to go up there again someday. It'd be perfect, but Madison would be perfect for a homebrewers convention up there. I don't know if there's anybody working on that, but it sure would be cool. I'm not sure when I'll be running the video episode, but I think it'll be a good one. We got some great shots of the hop yard and of the equipment that they're developing for harvesting the hops. Interesting stuff. And if you've got some, hops on your property, you may get some ideas from looking at that stuff, because, it's not the funnest thing to pick hops by hand. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form at basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. We've got combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store, too. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Good Cook 9-inch ceramic loaf dish, red, and cocktail margarita glasses, package of 20. And thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through our associate links on basicbrewing.com, too. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.